Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the Brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants.
Welcome back to the Fort Worth 148 Masonic podcast. My name is Evve Kirkendall, and I am the chaplain of Fort Worth 148.
This is Cody Cox, the senior warden of Fort Worth 148.
Hi, I'm Sean DeBon, junior past master of Fort Worth 148.
And it's been a couple of weeks since we recorded, because the last episode we actually recorded was the post-retreat, Lodge Summit episode, which has already been posted. We have a couple of other episodes that are still going to be posting from this point when we're recording. It's been a good couple of weeks since we recorded. Our illustrious brother and the worshipful master right now, he is celebrating his beloved's birthday, and they are going to be taking some time off, and that's why Brandy Patton is not with us today.
Happy birthday, Amy.
And it was fun that we had to learn how to use the computer in his absence.
Right. All of us Mac users suddenly had to learn how to use a Samsung PC, and I'm like touching the keyboard feeling like I'm touching slime or something.
It's so dirty.
It's so gross.
They look like Stanley Kubrick, a little, what was that?
2001
2000 Space Odyssey.
Like
People
talking
like
to me
beating on
right
computers and like, how does this thing turn on?
Right.
Oh, what was the one from Interstellar? TARS?
Yeah,
TARS.
Yeah. I
And
feel
then,
like
of course,
Matthew McConaughey in TARS.
And then, of course, with the episodes, trying to figure out where we're at, it's a little bit like timey-wimey,
Yeah,
loosey-goosey type things.
I feel like we're dealing with like time travel here, because we're going to be talking about some things that refer to episodes that haven't been released yet, but we're still going to be talking about them, at least from the listener's perspective. So that's a little wonky in our heads. But we're going to start off today. I'm going to let our brother, our lovely senior warden here, talk about what we're going to open up the episode with. So go ahead.
We decided that something that we'd start off in the bullpen today with is, again, something that all good Masons should be getting themselves into, at least in some part, and that is the idea of philosophy and rhetoric and things like that. I went to Half Price Books, and I found The Art of Rhetoric by Aristotle, and I was telling the guys that are here at the table that in one of the chapters, it talks about, and I'll read from here, it says, the kinds of rhetoric are 3 in number, corresponding to the 3 kinds of hearers. And of course, this hit me because, again, the number 3. For every speech is composed of 3 parts: the speaker, the subject of which he treats, and the person to whom it is addressed, the hearer to whom the end or object of the speech refers. I didn't know if you guys know this, but I do actually have my teaching certificate in communication applications. So in other words, this is something that I'm a little bit aware of when we talk about public speaking, and that when we talk about messages, we have both the sender, we have the receiver, and we have the message. So those 3 parts. One of the things that I brought in with my Masonic mind is I started thinking about, if we look at the 3 degrees, we can see where the speaker could be the master Mason, the message, which we've talked about extensively, I know within our group, the idea of the Fellowcraft degree, of how much stuff is in there. And then when you think about the receiver, you think about the EA. So I wanted to throw that out for us to talk about that a little bit. And I know Sean had something to say. So Sean, what were you talking about?
First 2 things before my thought. I want to ask, because I'm the Marine in the group, and I eat crayons. How would you
Blue
explain
is his favorite color.
How would you explain rhetoric to someone like me, who is a finger painter at best?
I would probably throw it out there as the ability to form coherent messages that can be understood by others. Now, I think if we're going to go back to Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, all of those folks, they were really looking at how do we, as philosophers, and when I say we, they, how did they understand the methods by which a message is crafted so that it could be persuasive to the masses? Because each one of the philosophical schools essentially approached rhetoric from a different perspective. You had the Stoics approached it from one perspective. You had the Cynics approach it from another perspective. And each one of them crafted their message in a way rhetorically that had a specific agenda in mind to persuade.
So we could say, in a basic layman's idea, rhetoric would be communication, but not just communication. It's the communication. It's also the means by which you communicate.
Absolutely.
And the specific message that you are communicating.
And the intention behind it.
And the intention behind it.
And I would add that, like, in the way that I would teach it to students is that rhetoric is like the art of the argument. It's not so much, and when we say argument, we're not talking about like angry, vitriolic argument. What we're talking about is, this is my stance on a subject. Here is my evidence to back up my stance. Hopefully this is persuasive enough for you to believe me. If not, I want to hear your evidence for your argument, where maybe we can find some common ground, or we can come to an understanding of why we disagree.
And that's where we developed the idea of the Socratic method, where the communication process isn't just a one-way communication, as Aristotle suggested, that passage you suggested. It's not just a one-way street. It goes from the person who is sending the message to the receiver, and then the receiver sending a message back. And so it is a cycle that goes on, and that's how we get this idea that information through the rhetorical process can be refined and elucidated in such a way that
Ooh, SAT words.
Right. Sorry.
Give us those 25-cent words.
I'm sorry.
When you have a theologian in the group.
I'm letting it go.
81 hours. Let's just say 81.
81% bitter. For the listeners out there, it took me 81 hours to get a Master of Divinity, and I could have gone half of that and gotten both an MBA and a JD out of it, a Dr. Juris and an MBA out of it. It makes me so angry. Anyway,
I asked that
I'm
question.
letting it go.
I asked that question rhetorically, right? So I homeschool my kids, and we
rhetorically.
Rhetoric. I homeschool my kids, and we follow a classical homeschool model of the 7 liberal arts and sciences. As Masons, obviously, we're intimately concerned with the 7 liberal arts and sciences. But my second point, and when Cody and I were talking about this before we started recording, that idea of 3, obviously that number is important to us. And then, so you have the receiver of the message, you have the message, and you have the sender of the message. And immediately I walked over to, we're at my house, and so I walked over to my bookshelf to get another book because Aristotle made me think of it. And that's The Republic by Plato. And so Aristotle was a student of Plato for about 20 years or so, right? Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
But it immediately made me think of, in The Republic, book 2, he spends a lot of time talking about this idea of 3, which is the individual, the state, and education. And so if we think about that, you have the individual, that would be the receiver of the message, and then the state would be the sender, and that education is the means by which the message is sent. It just made me think of that. I thought it was a neat thing, and then tying back into the fact that Aristotle was a student of Plato, and how that kind of started that thought process.
Aristotle being basically the father of current or Western civilization. Western
and then, of course, it all goes back
Western
to
thought.
Socrates. Socrates.
Oh,
Socrates was so great.
Socrates was so great.
only us 80s kids are going to get that.
I know it's going to be a little bit difficult, but I think the other thing we're talking about here, and hopefully our listeners and our brothers can understand, is that we're not philosophy majors.
Well, Evve is, I think.
Well, okay, yeah, 81 hours. But again, what we're getting here is we're pushing ourselves as Masons to get into some of this stuff and to look at it through our own lens. And I don't think there is necessarily a wrong answer that we're coming up with when we're doing our own interpretations of what these guys are saying. And it's important for us as brothers to maybe bring this to each other and say, hey, I was reading this from Aristotle, and not bringing it as, oh, look at me, I'm studying philosophy, but putting Masonry into action and trying to improve the lives of our brothers by saying, this is what I read, this is the interpretation that I made. What do you think about that? What do you guys think about that idea?
I want to put Brother Omar on the spot, because before we started, he was like, I don't know anything. I haven't studied this at all. Big time out there. So, Omar, tell us, what thoughts are inspired in your mind when we start mentioning these subjects and what you've heard so far?
That I hate all of y'all. Not because I love debating, and I think that's one thing that I really love about our lodge is we will question you on every theory you have, but in a brotherly way, right? Because we want to know what makes you tick and why you think the way you think. So being able to form a sentence and a debate on educated experiences or education and not just be a parrot where you're just repeating what other people are saying and you're actually having your own thoughts and, you know, your own expressions about why you're so passionate about something, I think is very valuable. And it's one of the many reasons why I love this lodge, because we can have very educated conversations and we learn from each other on a daily basis. Like I tell everybody that I meet, if you go to lodge and you don't learn something, then you pretty much wasted your whole entire night. Because every lodge, regardless of if it's in lodge during a meeting, but either before, during, or after a lodge, there should be some kind of education, even if it's just sitting around and a table and just hanging out and just shooting the breeze. That's where I learned the most outside of masonry and just general world and esoteric and rhetoric and all that stuff. Learning right now, we're sitting here doing a podcast and I'm getting a lesson on Aristotle and all that stuff.
I think it's also really interesting that you bring up the way that we as a lodge operate. And I think it's interesting because once you become part of our lodge, and when I say become part of it, once you get to be a master mason in our lodge, you get to be behind the curtain. You get to be with us in fellowship in a way that EAs and fellow crafts aren't. And what we typically do is if somebody sits in our group and they are like really passionate about a specific subject, what will end up happening in our lodge is people will ask them questions about it, and not in an obtuse way, but in a brotherly way that is geared towards finding out more and finding out what you really believe about this subject. We will start questioning people about subjects, and we do this with each other all the time. Me, Sean, Omar, Cody, we will sit around and somebody will say, "Oh, I believe this," and then everybody will just pile on in a really brotherly way about dissecting what it is you believe.
Unless you're discussing Wesley Crusher. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Wesley Crusher, the most disliked person in the Star Trek universe.
I still don't
the Jar Jar Binks
I
of
don't
Star
understand
Trek.
why you...
I like Wesley. I'm the oddball. I was young enough when he came on the show on Next Generation that I related.
So I saw this great argument, like why Wesley Crusher is so hated in the Star Trek universe. It's because he is one of those people in the story who got something for nothing.
Only because they got mad at him and wrote him out.
Oh, no, and not him as an actor. I'm talking about him as a character. Wesley Crusher himself was on a ship because his mom was there, and he got all of these opportunities handed him with having zero.
So in other
work
words,
to put into
you're
it.
upset about nepotism.
Well, and it kind of is.
Wesley Crusher was a Nepo baby. Oh, okay, that's what we got.
Beverly Crusher was his mom, let's be honest.
Talk about a tangent.
Right? But at any rate.
Welcome to 148. We talk about Aristotle and Wesley Crusher in the same conversation.
Yeah, this is pretty amazing. But that's exactly what we talk about. This is the kind of stuff like I bring up that Wesley Crusher is the most hated person in the Star Trek universe. And then suddenly we start dissecting that in a really fun and interesting way. And we do this about everything we do. And so
Zach Morris.
Morris's track. Yeah. But it's fun too because, as most of the guys who know me know, I love to play the devil's advocate. It doesn't matter what the topic is. Somebody will bring something up, and my personal beliefs could be 100% in alignment with them, but I am immediately going to flip into the exact opposite of the argument, and I'm going to start lovingly, brotherly, in a brotherly fashion, hammering their thesis. And because I want to question it so that it forces them to analyze it.
And to find out what you really believe. Do you really believe this, or are you just parroting something that...
And if it's a really good argument, if I'm pushing you towards, I believe what you're saying, but if I'm arguing against you to do that, then what I'm actually doing is I'm trying to improve your argument and make it better. I might mention, gentlemen, that we're now sitting in October, and in, we'll say, 2.5 months, I know the four of us are going to be down at Grand Lodge listening to people making arguments about why we should put things into our law. And so this might be something where if you're considering getting up and addressing Grand Lodge or something like that, think about what Plato and Aristotle and some of these guys had to say when you're getting up there to try and persuade us as members of the Grand West that we should agree with you. And don't be surprised when you get pushback. If you, I'm gonna be real honest. If you go to Grand Lodge and you're planning on presenting something, or you're going to Grand Lodge and you're planning on getting up to speak in favor of something or to speak against something, if you have not practiced, if you have not gotten in front of the mirror to listen to yourself, or ask some of your brothers or even your wife or something like that, hey,
or
listen to
gotten
me,
in front of your lodge and
Right.
made your argument
and done that,
yeah.
I don't think that the dais at Grand Lodge is the place to go on the fly with an argument.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I think that there are a lot of people at Grand Lodge that we see that get up in those circumstances, and you can tell that they are simply recapitulating the reason why they submitted a resolution. They are not making a coherent or cogent argument about
Thank
it.
you for your passion.
Tell me why
Tell me
that's to
why
pass.
I should support this, or why I should vote this down.
I know there's been several times where I know before we go to Grand Lodge, we as Master Masons just discuss the resolutions. I know there's times where, like, man, Lodge, like, you read it and you're like, man, that sounds like a really good idea, or you're going to be behind it. And then that person gets up there and speaks about it. And I'm just like, that's a horrible idea now. Like,
It really causes you to...
it really caused me to flip, because on paper it sounded good, but your argument was just, like you said, it was all over the place. It really didn't match up what I felt like the purpose was.
And when we think about that, again, when we're talking about the message, maybe the message is different on paper than it is when you're actually delivering it orally to a group or something like that. The speaker, maybe sometimes if you're putting something forward to Grand Lodge, maybe consider the speaker. Let's be real honest. If you're trying to change something that's been in the law for a long time, could the speaker it not be the person that actually like wrote this down, or that's like a co-sponsor,
designated hitter? Yeah.
but somebody that is more appealing to a larger audience or something like that?
I once heard somebody, because I used to be a professional presenter, and one of the things that we would get told in training all the time is that who you are up there speaks so loudly that I can't hear what you're saying. Meaning that you as the presenter have to make sure that you not only look the part, but sound the part of the rhetorical process. As the sender of whatever message, of whatever you're trying to convince the Grand West or any group that you want them to believe or to persuade them to do something. If you yourself are getting in the way of your message, then it doesn't matter how great, to Omar's point, your resolution is. It might make perfect sense. The moment you get up there and you don't know what your message is and you haven't articulated it very well, it's probably going to fail, because you have gotten in the way. You've stepped on your own feet when it comes to that.
I know. Excuse me. I know that. I think it was either last year or maybe 2 years ago. There was one, and it was like that. And we all talked beforehand. We were like, oh, yeah, we 100% agree with this. And then it was a big one, I think. Forgive me, because it's left me what it was. But I know we sit in our spot at Grand Lodge, and we all looked at each other. We huddled and we were like, yeah, never mind.
And we were like, yeah, never mind. We are totally voting the opposite of what we planned.
Especially in lieu of the fact that, specifically in Texas, I don't know about other jurisdictions, but our Grand Lodge law looks like the Library of Congress. It's so big, and that's just a bad thing in my opinion. So everybody should be, everything goes into the Constitution, kind of like the state of Texas government, right? Everything we do in Texas, they change the Constitution, and it makes it so onerous and overburdened. So you have to really think twice about what you're doing.
And I know that this kind of goes into another subject that we've talked about on previous episodes, but we also have this idea, and it's becoming, I think, more pervasive philosophically in Texas Masonry, is that we need the Grand Lodge to approve every single thing that we want to do as an organization. And that is going to be a problem, I think, for us moving forward. This idea that the Grand Master has to make every decision for us, as though we are a group of children that can't operate without Dad's approval.
Yeah, I know. I've seen a couple of other grand jurisdictions where their law book is like a small pamphlet, And that's, I think, the way it should be. Let the lodges govern themselves. And
Specifically, I hate to go back to federalism, but I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
What is not specifically enumerated to Grand Lodge is reserved for the lodges, and the Grand Lodge should stay out. And I hope that anyone who's, I doubt they are, but if you are considering making yourself available for the Grand Line, you should listen very hard and close to this, that making Grand Lodge law bigger and more onerous and having more resolutions in our Grand Lodge law is not a good thing.
Well,
You are
let's-
not doing
Why
this
do I
lodge
see
any
like
good.
Evie joining the like GOP of the Texas Masons? It's like,
no, it'd be the Tea Party.
It drives me crazy, like this idea that the
Lodges-
it should be that way. There are some things that the Grand Lodge should have jurisdiction over, and I think we can all agree about that.
Yeah.
But the way that they are micromanaging lodges now with our resolutions, and when I say Grand Lodge, please understand that I realize that it's not the officers up in Grand Lodge that are doing it. It's the constituent lodges who are getting up and delivering what I think are stupid resolutions. And I can hardly wait to see our resolutions, because everyone knows I have been on record on this podcast for saying that there are stupid resolutions. And we have gotten feedback about that, because if you want to do something in your lodge, God bless and go forward. I don't necessarily want to do it in my lodge.
Yeah.
So if it's a good idea, we will adopt it. But it doesn't need to be prescribed to us through Grand Lodge law.
Yes. Send out a memo.
Send out a memo.
It could have been a memo, Clark.
And
Right.
again, if we're getting back to what we were talking about rhetorically, and again, I've heard this from a brother at 148. Are we solving a 5,000-foot problem at the 50,000-foot level?
Exactly. The lodges should be handling that, not Grand Lodge, and not some constituent lodge from the other side of the state that has nothing to do with what we do here in the Metroplex. Let those groups deal with their lodges the way that they see fit. Let's agree on the things that are important. And if you have a great idea that's working really well in your lodge, put it out on Texas Freemasons and maybe we'll adopt it. But I don't need a resolution to make something happen.
It's an interesting circle, right? We start and we're talking about Aristotle and rhetoric, and we've gone back to Plato and government and justice,
Right.
and then we roll back to the rhetoric, right?
Yeah.
It really is a rhetorical circle when we think about that, because as you're making arguments, other arguments get added in, and it's the whole idea that you start adding things in, the argument seems to get bigger, and that's where the challenge comes to, okay, again, I need to focus on what is the grain, the kernel of the argument that we're making here. Not just on the podcast, but in any of those types of arguments, conversations.
Yeah.
Everybody's probably tired of hearing me say my catchphrase, but you really have to evaluate the difference between problems to be solved and environments to be lived in. And I say it so much these guys hate it, but every time somebody brings something up, is that a problem to be solved? Have you analyzed the thesis? Or is that just an environment to be lived in? And just because something's uncomfortable doesn't make it a problem. It might.
And there are some things that are just not in your sphere of influence, or that need to be in your sphere of influence to solve. I think that having lodges be a laboratory of problem solving is a much better way to make Grand Lodge and Freemasonry in Texas in general a better, stronger organization than for us to get together. And I've said this on a previous podcast, we have to stop micromanaging our own demise.
Absolutely.
We cannot micromanage our way into success. We have to have lodges that have the freedom to do new and innovative things. And the more that Grand Lodge gets in the way of that, the bigger disservice they are doing. So I am all for having a Grand Master and a Deputy Grand Master and all these people running around doing great things. Get out of the way is my message to you. Because more often than not, our Grand Lodge officers are a problem, not a solution. And I think in the past, let's say 5 years, more Grand Lodge officers have caused problems for this organization than any other person in the organization. And that is a hill I'm willing to die on.
Spicy, heavy take.
I'm not.
That's a hot take.
That's a hot
spicy
take.
hot
Get
take.
out of the way, Grand Lodge officers, because you're the problem. They have caused more drama in our organization than anybody else. When we end up on Masonic TMZ because of what's going on in our Grand Lodge line. That's a problem, and people need to be held account for that. And I'm not saying by bringing people up on charges, not that sort of thing. I'm talking about people taking responsibility for their actions and learning from it and changing their behaviors in a way that makes Masonry better.
And I would be interested to know that with some of those things that we know that have happened in the past few years, were there people that challenged and said, hey, maybe that's not the right decision? Was there some rhetoric going on between people and argumentation as far as, I think this is a good idea because, and then somebody else was saying, I don't think it's a good idea. Was there some of that Masonry in action happening, or
were people trapped in their own like bubbles of yes men telling them everything that they wanted to?
An echo chamber.
Their echo chamber of Grand Lodge influence, that it's a bunch of people surrounding them that support them and never tell them anything uncomfortable about what their behaviors are going to do and the ripple effect that it's going to have across the state and maybe even across Freemasonry in general.
And it comes back down to the lodge level too. I think you have to be careful of forming that officer clique. At Fort Worth 148, we're very intentional about keeping our entered apprentices and fellow crafts involved. We hold our stated meetings in the EA so that even if they can't vote or have an impact, they're there, they can take part in it. When we have our discussions at the table outside a lodge, we value what they have to say, and
they often ask really good questions about why are y'all doing it this way?
Yeah. And so I think that problem is going to not be fixed at Grand Lodge. It's going to be fixed at the individual level, and then it builds out just like everything else. You clean your own house, and then that's going to extrapolate out.
Yeah. This is definitely
insane.
Yeah, this is definitely not going to be a conversation that's going to end it today in today's episode.
Oh, trust me, the four of us are not going to solve that problem.
Yeah, we're not going to solve that problem. But if anyone out there has some thoughts or some interesting takes on this, please feel free to comment below on whatever podcast app you happen to be consuming this on. We'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts on what are some of the things that have come up since hearing this. Mm-hmm. For our main topic today,
main event. Here we go.
We were sitting around this table figuring out how do we want to come at this, because it's something that I think is probably a more serious topic than we've probably taken on in this podcast in the past. Mm-hmm. And it stems from something that kind of came up through a conversation about how we guard the West Gate. How do we ensure that we are a quality-based organization, that we are vetting our members in ways that ensure that we are getting the best possible members, the people who are going to be the most value to our lodges, and that are going to mesh the best with Masonic ideals and Masonic principles.
Sean, what was it that you had said that kind of sparked what we were talking about? What was it?
Oh, so we actually had a candidate who's now a Master Mason, but when he came to us, he came to our lodge specifically because he visited another lodge in the Metroplex and was told point blank at that lodge that you have to be a white Christian male to join.
Yeah, and when we heard that, the looks on all of our faces dropped. I'm speechless even now thinking about it. And this comes on the heels, I think it was either soon before this candidate came in, Omar was vetting a candidate for our lodge who had expressed interest. And Omar, why don't you tell us a little bit about, we're not going to name any names or anything like that because that's not appropriate, but we had the circumstance where somebody applied to be in his interest, and Omar did a little bit of research, and what did you discover?
Yeah, somebody on the Texas Freemason page posted that they had somebody in the Fort Worth area who was interested in being a Mason and wanted to reach out to a lodge. So I reached out to him, just brief conversation, who the guy is, a little bit about him, and if that Mason would recommend him to be a Mason. Everything came back good, so we have new candidate night at our lodge, so invited the guy up. Had probably like 30, 45-minute conversation with him, and nothing really seemed out of the ordinary with him. As we mentioned before, we have a 4 to 6 month waiting period of candidates coming up every Monday, us getting to know them getting to know us. I simply just did a Google search of his name, and all this white nationalism, very racist ideas came up with his name tied to him. Some of the papers he's written, some of the white nationalist organizations and podcasts he had been a member of, supported, worked at, and actually been on them. So it took just a simple Google search of this guy's name to bring up all this information about him. And then I reached back out to him and told him, hey, at this time, I don't think that you would be a good fit for our lodge or Masonry in general, and we wish you the best, and just separated ourselves from this individual. But there's nothing wrong with giving a candidate a petition the first time you meet them. But I would say before you even give them that petition, just do a simple Google search of that person's name. Everything on the internet lives forever, right? So screenshots, everything that you put out there. It took a simple Google search to find out that this guy did not encompass any of the values that we regard as Masons. And if we were to allow him into our lodge in Masonry, that'd be a huge black eye on just Masonry in general, but more Fort Worth 148.
And I think, so what we're getting down to is the idea of guarding the West Gate against bigotry. And what are lodges doing in order to ensure that the members that are coming into the fraternity are quality members and are guys that are actually going to stick to the ideals of the fraternity, instead of, I just know this guy and he's a good guy, and I'm using air quotes here, a good guy. Again, I'm sure that all of us around this table know quote unquote good people that are bigots. So how do we guard the West Gate against allowing those types of people into the fraternity? I know it's a hot take, and I know there's some people out there that this is probably making you squirm in your seat, but that's what we're supposed to do.
I think that the challenge that I have, the thing that really grinds my gears, is that we had, as Sean alluded to, we had now a Master Mason member who considered strongly not becoming a Freemason because he believed that this lodge that he went to, where he was told, and I'm also going to say, it is very possible that this Master Mason I'm talking to had an interaction with one person, and that one person does not represent the dynamics of their lodge. However, pause for effect. I also know that there are lodges out there, and we are all aware of them, that will not allow people of color to be members of their lodge. And that is not okay. And it strikes me as something that if we know it's the case, why are we not doing more? If we are going to talk about, from our last discussion, the principle that Grand Lodge should stay out of most things, this is one of those areas that I think the Grand Lodge is the sole group that could solve this problem by going in and snatching those charters and making it known at Grand Lodge that this lodge did this sort of bigoted behavior, and make that lodge and its officer line get up there according to Grand Lodge law and explain to the Grand West why they thought that was a good idea and what actions they have taken to stop that from ever happening again. That's the way that you get rid of bigotry in terms of institutional bigotry, is you shame the people who are doing it.
Yeah, Sean, what I was going to say is, you were talking about this earlier, the idea of, again, we have these people in our fraternity that love to say it's the internal and not the external, but then we have things like this happening where it's solely based on the external. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, to get to it, I think I would say we always talk about in Freemasonry, what's your elevator pitch to tell people who ask what Freemasonry is, what it is if they don't know. And we always say we're a group of people that takes good men and makes them better. And I don't know how we could have that kind of idea if we are running around letting people be bigots in whatever form, racism or whatever. But we say that the thing that makes you qualified to be a Mason is internal. It's your character. And bigotry is bad character.
Yeah,
It's a flaw.
It is a huge character flaw, and it's one of those things that I'm not even sure that. I'm obviously a theologian, a biblical scholar. I have an infinite amount of belief that transformation is possible, and when it comes to subjects like bigotry, that challenges me and that belief to no end, because bigotry is one of those things that is virtually impossible to squish out of someone and for them to refine themselves in a way that gets that out of them. Because when you start looking at another person based on their skin color, their religion, their ethnicity, whatever arbitrary label you want to stick onto them, and you don't see them as an equal human being, and you begin to dehumanize them, I'm not sure that's something you get to come back, that you can come back from.
Well, and let's go back to one of the basic things that any Mason should know. It's, again, the idea of the brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God. If you truly are living that out, then you have got to recognize that the person that's sitting across the table from you, if they're a different color from you, a different religious belief, if they're from another country, if they have a different sexual orientation than you do, it doesn't matter. You're both children of the grand architect. That is the end-all be-all. That's where things should stop right there. And I think people are just letting it go way too much. And I might mention here that in my mind, when I think about what we're talking about here, we know for a fact that a lot of this stuff is taught at home. Kids are not coming out of the womb racist and bigots. It's something that's taught. Well, as Freemasons, are we not here to educate ourselves and to improve ourselves? So if you are still holding those beliefs that you had, unfortunately, cast upon you as a child, and you haven't challenged those or gone somewhere with them, then again, are you practicing Masonry?
And I think that yours and Sean's point that it is about character. Like, a person's character is what recommends them to be a Mason from the beginning. And the moment you stop looking at someone in terms of their character and you start looking at them in terms of some of these other labels that we have been talking about today, you're not doing Masonry anymore, and you're not doing Masonry any favors. You're not guarding the West Gate when you don't allow black people into your lodge. You're just not. You're not doing Masonry. I don't know how to say that in any more eloquent way than that. And I would even say that if that's what you believe, then we're probably not Masons together in that. Because I can't be brothers with someone who would suggest that another human being based on their skin color or their religious disposition can't be Masons. That's not a brother that I would shake hands with.
Or makes him inferior in some way.
It does. It makes him inferior. In fact, I would kick him out. No, I'm kidding.
And I think it goes to guarding the West Gate, right? So there's a handful of lodges that I will not recommend anybody to go to, whether if they live right next door in that same neighborhood as that lodge, and they're like, hey, what lodge should I go visit this lodge? I'm going to steer them away from it, just because of some of the experiences I've had firsthand with racism. And then if you're vouching for a guy that I can Google and white supremacy comes up, that says a lot about who you are. Like, are you really a good judge of character if you're vouching for this person? And then also, what does it say about your lodge? Did they let you into that lodge? Do you have some of the same moral beliefs as what this person who you're vouching for? And it's not just it's all Masonry, but I've experienced it in Blue Lodge. I've experienced it in Appendant Bodies, where people have said some off-color stuff to me, and I'm just like, I have no clue why you would even think that would be okay to say to me. I know I've never given you any kind of inclination to think that I would support those kind of beliefs or just speaking in that kind of way about other individuals. It completely, I remember if you were a Master Mason in 2017 when the whole Grand Lodge of Texas and Prince Hall were gaining recognition
It
with
was
each
like
other.
mutual recognition.
Oh my God, the Texas Freemasons page was probably the most racist, hateful page that I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, people threaten like physical harm and death against people if they would show up to their lodges. Like, I've seen some of the most racist comments on that page when that was all going on. And those people are still Masons today. Like, they should have been kicked out like that day. Like, it's ridiculous that we've allowed this to happen.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so surprised that the focus of, if we really want to look at what is going to allow sustainability for Freemasonry moving forward, that is the exact opposite of what sustainability is going to look like. Because all it's going to take, and mark your words, it's not so much at this point an if, it's a when. When somebody takes a screenshot of some of those comments on Texas Freemasons, and there's a couple of adjacent Facebook pages that I have seen as well that have exactly the same sort of thing. All it's going to take is somebody taking a screenshot of that and it ending up on, I don't know, a news network, or being, like, if it gets high profile enough, it's going to blow up in our faces. And we are all it's going to be a Morgan affair all over again, where there's going to be so much, it's going to look like the United Kingdom, where they are making people expose themselves as Freemasons if they want to run for elected office, or if they,
Isn't there was something about them,
police officers,
yeah, they're wanting them to like
self-identify
well,
as
yeah, but
Freemasons.
they're also asking for roles of membership.
Yes.
Which seems like what they were doing, I think, wasn't it in the 70s in Italy, that they were asking for lodges to expose their memberships and things like that.
It's only going to take one of those events, and then suddenly the political tide is going to turn, and it is going to be a problem for all of us. And if we don't heed this moment and start thinking very hard and fast about how we're going to address these sorts of lodges that are getting away with this behavior, and make no mistake, people know it's happening. If we know about it, you can rest assured that there are people in the Grand Line who know about it. And the question that I have is the uncomfortable question. When does silence become endorsement?
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say is, what does that say about us? And I know that through careful self-reflection, I'm sure there has been a situation where I may have heard something. I can't think of anything off the hand, but I'm sure it's happened, where I'm guilty of not speaking out right then and there, and maybe thought about it later, and maybe I addressed it later. I don't know, but I'm sure that we're guilty. But if I can think of that for myself, what does it say about the rest of us that we allow it?
We've had circumstances at 148. We're not talking, we had the potential member that we vetted, and thank goodness we vetted, because that could have ended up not only being like getting a neo-Nazi in our organization, but that could also be one of those people who's joining Freemasonry to expose, I'm using air quotes there, Freemasons, like what happened in the Grand Lodge of Arizona last year.
Oh, with the Catholic kid.
Yeah, with somebody coming in and secretly videotaping our rituals and things like that under the pretense of being a member.
And I don't say that with any disparaging towards the Catholic Church at all. It was him as an individual.
Yeah, he wasn't acting as an agent of the Catholic Church. But we vetted that. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? We as a lodge guard the West Gate, I think, probably better than most lodges do, because of we do things like this. We are putting ourselves out there on the internet, and we have social media, and we do podcasts, and we're out there for everybody to see. But on the other side of that, at what point do we start wondering, like, what's the solution here, people?
It's not just tacit, like you'd say, what's the old adage? All it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And it's not just that we're giving tacit acknowledgement. Our silence is support in that fact, because those people represent us. If you run around saying you're a Master Mason in the Grand Lodge of Texas, you are a mirror for the entire Grand Lodge of Texas.
Whether you want to or not.
Yeah, whether you want to be or not. And I think that's part of the, with great power comes great responsibility thing. We don't have great power except the secret green bean casseroles, but
the
as long as
secret
they're not
ingredient.
sweet.
Hey, the secret ingredient is sugar. Hush.
You represent. When you join an organization, at every level, you somewhat represent that organization. But there is some level of allowance for people who are new or younger or junior as it were.
But there's also, like in any other organization, let's say that you're working for Corporation XYZ. If somebody goes out on social media and who works for Corporation XYZ and says something racist or something really out there, like the kind of things that we've been talking about, that organization is going to fire that person or bring them up on disciplinary action, and because that person doesn't speak with them. And so there's this distance in a corporate environment that a corporation structure has from each individual unit. Whereas with Freemasonry, because of the fact that we're a fraternal organization, there are certain perceptions about us out in the world. Let's just be honest. Whenever somebody speaks as a Freemason and says, I'm a Freemason, and here's our lodge, and we don't allow people of color, we don't allow non-Christians to be members, that carries the weight of the entire organization, whether they're intending it to or not. And it becomes very difficult for us to disentangle that from all of us.
Yeah. And if we have listeners who don't know, like we don't have any of those aforementioned regulations. Like the only thing that we say for people to join our fraternity is that we don't allow atheists and we don't allow women. That's just it. We're a male fraternal organization, and you can't be an atheist, so you have to believe in God. That's it. Not you have to be a Christian or you have to be a Jew. We have Jewish brothers, we have Muslim brothers, we have Christians of all 972,412 varieties of Christian that we have now.
And one just got invented right now.
Yeah.
There's a church somewhere where the members got mad and they're like,
yeah, we're going to split off from that group.
But
somebody cooked the wrong casserole for Sunday.
But that's another thing, and we mentioned this too in our prep session before we started recording. In Texas, it's pretty common you visit one of the not so metropolitan lodges, and their prayers in lodges will be, in Jesus' name we pray. And we're supposed to be non-sectarian. And so I'm sure it's not malicious. It's probably just habit. That's the way they pray at home.
Yeah.
And so it just comes out that way, and that's fine. And probably nobody's going to have a problem with it.
99% of the time.
And I know you mentioned this before, Evie, in a couple episodes, but it's something that you have to be cognizant of. If you're going to be the guy that's praying for your lodge,
I can't pray for my preferred deity.
Yeah.
Because if I have a member of the lodge, and in fact, at 148 we do have Jewish members, and it's not unheard of for Muslim members to come be at 148.
We have a frequent Muslim visitor.
And also just to presuppose that everybody in the room shares my preferred deity does a disservice to them. So whenever I'm the chaplain and I'm praying, I don't have the luxury of just praying for me or in the name of my faith. I'm praying for everyone in that room, and that includes the Jewish and the Muslim and the Hindu and the Sikh brothers that might be present.
Yeah, that's probably hearkening back. You mentioned the Morgan affair. That's one of the things they tried to use against us, is we use terms like the great architect of the universe instead of saying Jesus.
And not recognizing that we're just using God language that is inclusive. The I word.
How dare you be inclusive?
How dare you be inclusive, especially. We do have the Bible that can identify as
Lord.
any spiritual object. Like, we have the non-binary Bible.
Good Lord in heaven.
Good Lord.
So here's the thing that we're kind
in
of...
your mercy, hear our prayers.
Here's what we're getting at. We, the four of us here, when we were talking about this and getting into this concept, the thing that stuck was, again, guarding the West Gate against bigotry. Yeah. That's the very first thing that all lodges in Texas should be doing, is guarding that West Gate against that. Now, the other flip side of it is we recognize and know that there is that element present in not just Texas Freemasonry, but Freemasonry. We know that there's that element there. So how do we combat that type thing? And I think the first thing that we have to do is exactly what we're doing right here. We're calling it out by name, and we're recognizing that it is a problem that needs to be addressed. Now the big step is, how do we address it other than just like calling it out by name?
I think it's one of the challenges, and I think I brought this up to you and to Brandy, and you might have been there too, Sean, I'm not sure. But the problem with guarding the West Gate is what happens when the West Gate has already fallen and an entire lodge is full of people who will only allow white Christians to be members.
That's what I was arguing, is saying that we already know that it's there.
Yeah, that's when Grand Lodge has to step
And
up.
ultimately, my point is that Grand Lodge is the only organization right now that can solve this problem. And I'm not sure that the stomach is there for the kind of work that's going to be necessary to root this out across the state. Because it means going in, and it means snatching charters, it means shaming people, and it means getting smaller to get bigger.
Our law presentation, or I think at our summit, we had spent a little time in the Grand Lodge Law Book looking that up, specifically about pulling charters and what's the process. We got to that section where when a charter gets pulled, the reasoning why is supposed to be clearly laid out for the Grand West.
Absolutely.
So that's the shaming part of that. So if a Grandmaster pulls a charter, it comes to Grand Lodge at our Grand Annual Communication, the details of the reasoning why is supposed to be, per the law book, laid out for the Grand West.
For the Grand West. Yeah.
And that's the way that we put that out there in the meeting minutes of the organization of the Grand Lodge.
And we also found out, though, by reading the Grand Lodge law, that the giant gaping loophole in that is that the Grand Master can decide to suspend a charter without pulling it,
and then give it back at his will,
and then giving it back at will, without having to give any explanation as to why, and why that charter was suspended in the first place. So it ends up being this lack of accountability that can also be given. And I realize that not every charter being pulled or suspended needs to go to the Grand Lodge. That is not the argument that I'm making here. I think that we should have our Grand Line officers have the flexibility to do what is appropriate in the context of what's being dealt with.
And again, we've talked about that's the reason that we elect those Grand Line officers, is because we are imbuing them with the power in order to do that. We're trusting them to do the work that we need for them to do as members of the Grand West. That's the idea.
And here's ultimately my point in that, and bringing all this up, though, is that it seems to me that too much latitude has been given with the hopes that these lodges that we all know exist will get their act together, and that the Grand Master or the Grand Line or whomever is responsible for that. I'm not going to put it on any one person, because it's not any one person's responsibility at this point. It's a lot of people failing, and a lot, like a cascade failure of this happening, of everyone just assuming, to Omar's point, oh, he's a good guy. He really didn't mean to be a racist. He really didn't mean to be a Christian fundamentalist authoritarian. He really isn't a bad guy. He was just having a bad day. That doesn't represent him or his lodge. And that sort of thing has happened over and over again. And now we're getting to the point where we can't tolerate that anymore.
Do you think it's also the fact that maybe people are afraid to step up and put it out there or bring it up, because if they do, then we're acknowledging that it is happening?
Well, I think
people are scared to put it out there and acknowledge, hey, yeah, we got racists in our lodge, we got racists in the DFW, we got racist lodges. Like, they're afraid to acknowledge it.
I think there are ways to handle that without getting in the way of us enforcing the standards that we need to have. I think that we can keep things quiet enough that it doesn't cause any bigger problems, but by not doing anything, we are just setting ourselves up. Like I said, it's the when, not if. There's gonna come a point and I fear that it's gonna come in the not too distant future, where someone is gonna say something on Texas Freemasons, the Facebook page. It's gonna get screenshot, and it's gonna get sent to a CBS or an ABC or a Fox affiliate somewhere, and it's gonna end up all over the news. I'm not talking about Masonic TMZ. I'm talking about the national news. And it's going to be a giant mess for not just Texas Freemasons, but it's going to be Freemasons across the United States.
We're focusing on the details of this, but another facet of this is what you're missing out on in doing this and limiting things in this way, if for those lodges that choose to take those actions. Our lodge is massively lucky in that we have a diverse group of people. We've spent a lot of time, especially recently. Brother Omar has been a fantastic, somewhat of an ambassador to the Prince Hall lodges. He and I and others, I know Kadeem from Billy Moss Lodge, spends a lot of time with our Prince Hall brothers, visiting their lodges. I visited their lodges. They come to ours. And we gain so much from that different perspective. Seeing their ritual and learning what they do improves me as a Mason. And I would assume that it does for everybody.
Yeah.
But that I tend to try to stay away from that whole idea of diversity as our strength, as a blanket statement.
If we are guarding the West Gate in the appropriate ways against the things that are really problematic coming into our lodge, if we're guarding against the West Gate, guarding our West Gate against those things, then it makes the kind of diversity that we would then be welcoming into the lodge ends up being a boon for us in terms of our brotherhood experience.
I think what we're talking about here is the idea of not being diverse for diversity's sake.
Exactly.
But being diverse because you're intentional about it and you know the benefits of different points of view. Again, going back to what we were talking about rhetoric, different points of view, making a good argument, knowing all the sides to the argument. That's going to help you to become that much of a better person.
I think that if a lodge is a purist on any level, let's just say a political purist lodge, that you only want people of a specific belief system. If you only want certain religions, if you only want certain races, then it ends up being this environment where you are not diverse and you are not welcoming any other ideas besides the echo chamber that you have created for yourself.
Yeah.
How are you going to grow?
You can't.
How are you going to grow?
You can't grow.
But that's the thing. Think about this. Do we really believe that those are lodges that want to grow? And I'm not talking about in terms of membership. I'm talking about in terms of growing as personal growth.
Development.
Yeah.
You have to be, the catalyst for change is discomfort.
Yeah.
The reason we talk about with our rhetoric and the way we talk to some of our candidates and our brothers outside of lodge and challenging their thesis is so that they can grow in that thesis.
Yeah.
Develop their thought.
Yeah.
It's the same way as a human for each individual Mason. And if we're going to run around and saying we're a fraternity, that we're improving ourselves and each other, you better be challenging yourself and challenging your brothers to grow as humans and be better. Just do better.
Yeah, do better. I think that's probably a great place to wrap up the conversation today. As
and
always,
if this conversation made you uncomfortable, welcome.
Welcome to Fort Worth 148
podcast.
Yeah, we really felt like that this was an important topic to talk about. It's a little bit heavier than some of the topics that we've talked about, and I'm not sure that other people are talking about it right now in the same sort of direct way that we are addressing it today. But I hope it was. I hope relevant.
They are. I hope somebody is.
Well, I hope somebody's talking about it. But when I say that, other podcasts, other social media adept Masons out there. But it is an important conversation. And if you want to be part of this conversation, please feel free to leave a comment below in whatever podcast app you are listening to, whether it's Spotify or Apple or some other one. Drop us an email, reach out to us via the socials. Each one of us is on the Facebook. I'm probably friends with most of the people who listen to this lodge on Facebook. Please feel free to send us a message, send Cody a message. He's been getting quite a few comments back from different brothers from around the state.
And the other thing, too, is if you are listening to this and you disagree with what we're saying,
let us know.
Then
tell us why we're wrong.
Let's have that discourse with each other.
Let's have some rhetoric.
We're
not opposed to having some guests.
Oh, hey, come on.
Yeah.
We'll get you in the hot seat.
We'll put you in the hot seat and let you listen.
We haven't done that in a while as a external non-148 guests.
Yeah, we haven't had a lot of opportunities for that, but we've got some plans in the hopper for that. So yeah, and as always, reach out to us, let us know what you think, because we are here for that. And additionally, if you are that one listener from North Korea who keeps listening to our podcast regularly, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Supreme Leader. We are so glad to know that you are listening to us.
Yes,
Thank you.
we hope we are making a difference in North Korean masonry.
Is it a choice for can you pick North Korea as a VPN server, or is this got to be really a North Korea person?
Listen,
don't pop our bubble here.
We're really hoping. You know what? I want to have him on as a guest.
Yeah.
Please, Supreme Leader, tell us How can we help?
It's Kim Jong-un. That's where we
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
Before too soon, it's probably going to be like his daughter or something
I
like
think
that.
there was a movie about that, and I don't think
His daughter?
that movie did very well.
Oh.
The people that made the movie are still alive. It's okay.
Yeah, that's what's important. So anyway, as always, we are glad to be part of your Masonic Day. We hope that we've made a difference in your life and brought a little bit of value and a little bit of a smile to your day, and that our jokes landed because we try to be funny too. At the end of this, we are done, and my name is Evve Kirkendall, and I am signing off.
This is Cody Cox signing off.
Sean DeBond signing off.
Omar Galeazzi signing off.